Welcome to the Richmond Film Network podcast, your all-access pass to the world of independent cinema. Each week, we go beyond the credits and sit down with the creatives who turn vision into reality. Tune in weekly to find out who's on the RFN pod.
Welcome to the RFN podcast. My name is MK Martey, your guest host, and today I'm joined by co-directors Robert Hochstetter and Alex Gerber to talk about their short film, The Lake, screening Saturday, August 9th during the 2 o'clock student spotlight block at the Park RVA. Okay, so Rob, Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so let's start with the tone of the film. So the lake feels both grounded and otherworldly. How did you envision the lake as both a physical space and a mental space, almost like a state of mind?
That's a great question. Alex, do you have any thoughts on that?
I remember when we were first writing the script, Rob came to me and he said he really wanted to do something surreal and dreamlike. So we definitely had that vision from the outset of writing the film. And I think it really just came down to two main things. One, the sort of emptiness of the story. There's very few characters and the interactions they have are very sparse. A lot of the film, the main character is alone. And so I think that led to this sort of dreamlike quality because you kind of feel like you're just in this man's head the entire time or living sort of his view of the world, not necessarily the world as it is. And then also obviously the presence of the character played by Trin Dunn in the film, who's sort of comes and greets the main character from the lake. It sort of symbolizes, I guess, somewhat of a magical realist element. You know, it's not really explained where he comes from, what exactly his situation is, but it's clear that it's not quite of this world. So I think those are the two things for me that really sold the dreamlike feel.
Yeah, for sure. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Rob?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that it was definitely, I think, very important for us in terms of the setting to sort of make the setting also kind of feel like a character in and of itself. Like we get sort of trying to build sort of a sense of agency with sort of within the lake as a setting. We wanted it to feel very lively, but also kind of grounding at the same time, and sort of have that be a thread that runs throughout, throwing around ideas and brainstorming. I felt I think we knew we wanted sort of one sort of central, I guess, symbol or icon or motif to run through. And it felt like going with something like a body of water or something like that. It felt like there was a lot that could be done with that.
Right. So the story explores grief in a very restrained, lyrical way. What was your approach to showing emotional depth without leaning too much on dialogue? So were there moments where you felt more tempted to add more exposition, or was majority silence always the plan?
Well, to be honest, part of this is born out of just the logistical constraints of making a student film, right? We knew from the outset that oftentimes student films, one of their pitfalls is that they go for dialogue heavy stories, because I think new writers tend to go for that, but oftentimes you're not great at dialogue mixing, you're not great at recording, you don't have microphones that are that high quality, you don't have a big crew. So we sort of both agreed from the beginning that just from a logistical perspective, probably doing a film with minimal dialogue was just going to end up turning out better, or more close to something that's professional quality, even though neither of us are professionals. But then luckily it ended up also fitting very neatly with the story we wanted to tell, because so much of this main character in our film's backstory is one of loneliness and isolation. So it's really a guy that's not having too many conversations in his day-to-day life. He's not speaking to too many people. So you sort of want the audience to feel like they're experiencing that isolation too in the earlier part of the film. And then when the ghostly character comes in the second part of the film, it's clear that there's a lot that's left unspoken between the characters, because they clearly have a past together and they clearly have a background together. And so almost leaving that unsaid, I think, allowed for us to imply a lot more, powerful past that these characters have. And I think it turned out for the best.
Yeah, I definitely think that we knew from the outset that we wanted to rely more on visual storytelling than anything else. And by not relying too much on dialogue, we could leave things open to sort of interpretation. As I know that I personally, as a film viewer, always love it when I get to put the pieces together myself on what I think is going on, rather than sort of having it pulled to me. Sort of trusting the audience to make what they want to out of it is definitely was an important goal of ours.
Yeah, and without much talking, the camera kind of becomes, the storyteller. How did you approach, shot composition and movement to communicate, emotion? Did you storyboard in detail or lean more into like instincts once you were like on location set?
Yeah, so we did do like shot by shot storyboarding, although it wasn't like super religious in terms of keeping to that once we were on location. But I think the main thing that we were trying to do was we wanted to keep it generally pretty static throughout the film, except for just a couple of key moments. The main idea behind sort of having it be static for the most part was sort of building, I guess, a sense of like stasis of like making it feel a little bit more dreamlike, and that everything is like sort of oddly or like surreally still for the most part. And then once that moments of stillness and the staticness is broken, it makes the impact of those moments all the greater because suddenly the camera is moving around in sort of different ways. It sort of makes the impact of that greater when you sort of only use it sparingly. At least is what the idea was.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I also think that, to your point, MK, like we did have a very in-depth storyboard, but at a certain point, like at least my philosophy as a filmmaker is you sort of want to work like with your film and not against your film, right? So even if you have something on paper that's what you envisioned, you kind of have to like adapt to your set, to your environment. So there were many times that we kind of like showed up to the locations, and like most of our film takes place in nature. And we showed up to these locations and noticed, a leaf that looked a certain way, or noticed some like grass or brush that like was
Right.
flowing in the wind, and we were like, okay, like we have to shoot with that. We have to figure out a way to work that in because that feels like an important part of like the place we're in physically right now, and we wanted to communicate that to the audience. So I think sort of like the dual approach, like having a concrete plan that will work, but not sticking to it too religiously, as Rob said, is definitely something I'd recommend.
Yeah. Did you ever have any like weather challenges or shooting outside, or did it help?
Thankfully, we didn't have weather challenges, but we did have sort of some chaos on our set. I had the flu the week leading up to the shoot, so I was like sick the whole time, wearing a mask, like just trying to get through these shots. And also, like in the end of our film, there's a scene where the characters are around a fire, and starting that fire was difficult. It was extremely cold where we were shooting. Our like hands were all numb. The fire went out multiple times. We had to like drive to like go buy like lighter fluid and stuff. So there definitely were some environmental challenges, but at the end of the day, I feel like it made the experience all the more memorable for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta love those unexpected moments on set. So, family and memory are core themes here. I feel like I kind of was getting some family vibes, but definitely some memory. And so, what made the story feel urgent or personal for you to tell now? Do you think that viewers will connect with the story in different ways depending on what they've experienced? Or
Yeah. I mean, I think that I guess a lot of the themes that we were dealing with of like memory and nostalgia, and yeah, family is definitely a core part of it. And then just the process of like grief and longing and sort of recollection are all like pretty universal themes that, if not everyone has dealt with them in the past in their life, everyone will experience it and find those themes relatable at some point in their life. So I think definitely uh, the idea was to sort of work with themes that are very universal and that everyone kind of has their own thoughts or something to sort of say about. And so I definitely hope that that people will find the movie thematically relatable, because I think they are very sort of universal human experiences that we're working with here.
Yeah, I agree with Rob, and something I like about the way that our film approached the subject of grief is it's not like a very like showy film in the sense that like the characters aren't like crying and screaming like bang the wall. I feel like a lot of films that are about grief, like when they focus on like that initial point, like after you lose someone, like there's a lot of like very high emotions and there's a lot of like turbulence. But this film really is more about like sort of like the stages of grief in between, perhaps like acceptance and longing is more like what this has to do with. So I kind of think that it shows a side of grief that I think is honestly more relatable to most people, and one that's like maybe perhaps a little bit undercovered in art in general. So I love that we were able to make a story about grief that was a bit more understated and a bit more like patient with the characters and showed them at a different stage in their process than a lot of other stories do.
Yeah. Are you guys Her fans at all of the movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix? Yeah,
Yeah,
that
we're both.
I think you guys definitely nailed that, like dream, like surreal, very absent from reality, but still very present. I really was a really big fan of the ending, and I think it was a very, very, very beautiful film. How did you strike that balance between realism and supernatural, and particularly with your ghost character? They feel like very familiar and ethereal at the same time. What were you hoping their presence kind of brought to the screen?
Yeah, I think with the ghost character specifically, we wanted him to feel like not quite of this world, but also not like overtly supernatural. Um, Kind of like how you would experience, like again, like almost like if you were being visited by someone in a dream kind of state, whereas like the way they appear to you is like sort of in a way that is like a more grounded, realistic way, but there's like some kind of like vague separation there. I think that's what we were trying to get at. It was definitely very important to like striking that balance between the groundedness and the dreaminess. It was supposed to be something that someone could plausibly dream or someone could imagine.
Yeah,
So we wanted to keep the viewer sort of grounded in that world, but still make it sort of feel a little bit surreal and just a little bit a little bit supernatural.
yeah, I totally get that. Those dreams that start normal and are normal, but when you look back on it, they're definitely not real. So when that character is introduced, he comes very subtly, very casually. It's very normal. As the film goes along, you start to realize they're a different kind of presence. They're not just two dudes meeting up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about your process and the production. What creative choices or limitations ended up helping the film, even if they're tough at first?
We were definitely very lucky from a budget perspective to have the support of our college's media center, so we were able to get all of our equipment from them without paying. And so that definitely gave us a lot more flexibility. But I also think in terms of working within constraints, it was very important for us to make the constraints, I guess, sort of play to the constraints as a strength, sort of not relying too much on areas where maybe we didn't have a whole lot of support, like not relying on a great deal of like visual effects, because neither of us are like visual effects artists. Not relying on needing a huge amount of like props or makeup or needing to travel long distances for locations. I think from its inception, we wanted to play to our limitations, not only in a way that makes it so that we didn't have to go beyond our limitations, but we used the sort of limitations that we were given as the basis for the film. And so I definitely think that ended up being a major strength in the production process. And yeah, just sort of really sort of playing to the limitations rather than sort of fighting against them was, I think, our biggest goal with the production side of things.
Yeah. Okay. So you co-directed this. What was your process like as a team? Did you divide roles, or did you kind of make decisions side by side?
I kind of feel like because this was a really small, like informal production, like it was just us and then our we had one of our friends who was sort of like behind the scenes, like helping us out, and then we had Trin Dunn who acted as the other actor in the film besides Rob. So it was kind of just the four of us on that set, like just figuring it out and hearing everyone's like input. We didn't really have too much of like a hierarchy or that sort of thing,
Mhm.
but there definitely was like sort of like a natural division of roles just based on what we're all good at, right? So like Rob handled the music entirely, for example, because he's a super musical guy. I'm not really talented at music at all, so like that was really mostly Rob. The cinematography was, I'd say, like mostly was done by me. Like that's something I'm sort of more interested in. The writing was slightly more done by Rob, but with a lot of input from me. So everyone, I think, just got to like lean on their strengths in like a good way. And I think it ended up working out for the best in the film. But what I also liked about our process is that it never was super definite. If I had like an idea on the music, like Rob was always willing to like hear me out on that and try and incorporate it. Or if Rob wanted to like set up a certain shot in a certain way, I totally like, would let him come in and do that. And so that, I think, made the film like have sort of like our imprint is on all parts of it, both me and Rob, and I'm really happy with how it turned out in that way.
Yeah, what would you say is the most like technically difficult scene to capture? Not even just scene, maybe just most difficult part of the process for this film, whether it was, lighting, pre-production, casting, things like that.
Yeah, I remember we definitely struggling with casting was surprisingly difficult. We were really struggling to find someone else to play this other character. Even though you think it'd be easy to cast a two role film, but thankfully we ended up getting our friend Trin to step in, and we knew that we could trust him, that he would do great in the role. He was a great actor, and it ended up working out really well. And then also I think shooting on the actual shooting days was mainly tough just due to the time constraints. We only had one weekend to shoot the whole film, and we ended up shooting the whole thing in just under 48 hours, I believe. And so definitely like working within that time constraint was like, oh man, I wish we had a little bit more time to work on setting up these shots or like getting all these different takes to pick from. We only really had like we couldn't get a bunch of different takes of every single scene. There were only a handful of scenes of which we were able to get multiple takes to pick from, and that kind of thing. So that was probably, I think, the biggest technical challenge on the production side of things that I can think of.
Yeah, I totally agree with Rob. Those were two of the biggest challenges for my point of view, along with like the time constraint of the actual filming. As someone that, like, I worked a lot on the editing of the film, and you'd think that a film that's not even 15 minutes long would be like relatively a breeze to edit, but we both spent like dozens of hours editing the movie. Like even something as simple as like taking the clips from your audio and syncing them all those with the clips from your video, like having to like buy a new SSD because your computer runs out of space, like these things that like aren't really part of the artistic process, but they're part of just like the technical barriers you have to overcome to make a movie, like are things that I think a lot of people like might underrate. Like I underrated in my mind how like burdensome some of those tasks would be, and I definitely won't again. But so it felt
Yeah.
rewarding to finally get them done, but that was one of the, I guess, the most like tedious part of the process for me.
Yeah, and it was also our first time ever making like a short film too. So I think we both learned a lot of lessons on the technical side of things.
Oh, first time? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that was absolutely beautiful. Seriously.
Thank you
So
so much.
I do believe you guys have had this premiered already to an audience. What was it like seeing such a quiet, intimate film on a big screen with an audience for the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really interesting because especially when you're watching it back in the editing process, you're watching it. We were watching on just like a little laptop screen, and so like really editing with that in mind, without having like sort of a reference of what it looks like on a big screen. It was almost a little bit jarring when we're watching it on the big screen at the same time as the audience is watching it for the first time on this big screen. So it definitely brings the film into a sort of a different context. And I remember, at least for me, I don't want to speak for Alex, but at least for me personally, like I was like almost a little bit off put seeing it on a big screen for the first time. And I was like, uh-oh, like these sorts of things are playing differently than it did when I was watching it on a small screen. And I was a
Yeah.
little bit nervous about that. But then seeing people's reactions to it and talking to them about it afterwards definitely was very relieving. And I was glad to see that it ended up landing well on the big screen as well, which I wasn't sure if it was going to. So that was good to see.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Rob said. And I would echo the thing of like it's just so hard to like look at your own film through like impartial eyes. So like when like I mean I must have watched the film but like you know hundreds and hundreds of times by the time it showed on the big screen. So I was really more so watching the people around me when that happened and seeing like what they were thinking about it and how they were reacting. And because it's a quiet and like slow film, a lot of people were just being very quiet, being very attentive, and I was like, so they're either bored or they're enraptured by it, and like who it's kind of hard to know until after it's done because once you've watched something that hundreds and hundreds of times, even if you love it and it's your own film, like you're gonna just look at it with a more critical eye, and you're gonna like find it a bit like it's hard to like know what like the organic pacing of it is going to be to someone that's never watched it before, or how like these emotional notes are going to hit because you've just seen them over and over again. So it's a thing where like you eventually just lose control, and like when it's shown to an audience, like it becomes their film too. Like
Yeah.
it's you can try and control it as much as you want, but at the end of the day, like no matter how many times you watch it, you're not going to be able to know for sure like how others are gonna feel. And each time you watch it, you honestly get less of an accurate picture of what like a first time viewing is like.
That's very true, and I relate to, you know, a film looking different on laptop versus projection. I wish test screenings were more common in moments like that, because you know you're already nervous enough about your work being shown. So getting through that can be hard, but sharing your work with an audience is always going to be slightly cringe, no matter what. I even hear like big stars and big time directors who still get cringe about their work till this day. So that makes me feel a little bit better that it's a personal thing. It's an artist thing, actually. It's an artist, like, all artists kind of have that deep down. So you're definitely not alone. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
and,
for
and you're
sure.
filming at the Richmond Art Fan Fest. That's It's gonna happen again. So the Richmond audience
Yeah.
is gonna watch and very closely at your film, and enjoy it with you.
Rob does more different like types of art than I do. He does like a lot of music. He's like done performances in the past, and so I imagine he has a bit more experience than me. But for me, this was really the first time that I had like art that I made like displayed to like a meaningful group of people publicly. So it was a crazy experience, and I'm looking forward to doing it again at the
Yeah,
in Richmond.
I was gonna say, don't stop, don't stop. Working towards an audience is what you need. Like, your work is yours, but you want people to see it as well. So it means more when you share it. Okay, moving on. So when the film does fade to black, let's say at the Arfen Festival or anywhere else, what do you hope audiences walk away with? Is there a specific image, feeling, or question that you want to linger?
Yeah, I think Rob like put it best earlier when he said like we really wanted our film to be something that like lived in the viewer's mind, like and was able to. I don't want to say relatable, but people see like parts of their own selves or their own stories in the film, in a way that makes them feel like seen. But not just that, but also like people finding for themselves what the meaning of the story even is. So I don't think either Rob or I wanted to like prescribe like a blanket meaning on the film. I'm sure both of us have like our theories and ideas about like what things mean, what characters are what's going on with certain characters. But um I really would be fascinated to just see everyone like try and piece together like what the story like means to them.
Okay.
Just like kind of a cliche answer, right? But if I had to pick like for me the biggest takeaway, I think that like um the process of acceptance that the characters go on, and that being a core theme of their journey, is to me like the core of the movie in terms of like what I would say to expect someone to take away from it, you know.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that perspective a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I guess like for me, all art kind of interrogates some aspect or another of the human condition, and that can take many different forms or many different particular subjects or themes. But I guess with this film, I just hope that anyone who sees it comes away thinking about the subject matter and thinking about the themes. But I think one of the great things that art can do is just get people to think about things, um, even if it's not necessarily giving an answer to something, but asking a question, I think is an important step. And that really more than anything else is what I hope that people get.
Oh, I actually have one more answer to that question on like sort of like a meta level. I think a lot of like student films are either like action films or comedies or like college romances and stuff like that. And I think a lot of like student filmmakers like kind of like limit themselves imagine in their imaginations to like themes and stories that are particularly like relatable to like a college student or to a life of a teenager or an early 20 something. And I would encourage people to like broaden their horizons. Maybe like I love that Rob and I got to make a film um that felt a bit different, and a bit maybe off the beaten path from what student films like typically are like, with its pacing, with its dialogue, with its characters. Not that like our film is like the most original film out there, but I just think it was cool, and I think that um, it's a trend in student filmmaking that I think could be people could do with exploring outside that box more often.
Yeah, I definitely can sense that. I think you have a particular style that you found, and you like that slow burning cinema. It a lot of people love it. I'm a big fan of it as well, and that leads me to my next thing. So what's next for you on the radar? What's next from you?
That's a great question. I think we both have said that we would both love to make another film together, and we don't have any like immediate plans to do that, but I'm sure we would love to do that at some point in the future. We both just graduated from college, so we're kind of just still in the midst of figuring out what we're
Which
going to do next with our lives. William and Mary in
Oh, okay,
in
nice.
Williamsburg. Yeah.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you so much. And so I know we both have like our own sort of like lives to get together. I'm always trying to sort of do more stuff with like music, because that's one of my other sort of main creative pursuits. So we don't exactly know what we're going to do next, but I think we both know that it would be really, really cool if we had the chance to make another movie together at some point in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I feel like it would be so interesting seeing how the process would go a second time with everything we've learned from the first one. I think it would honestly be exponentially more like smooth, and so I'd look forward to it just for that reason alone, but also for the chance to like explore more themes and tell a new story for sure. So I hope that it's not the last film I make. Although being out of college, I feel like you have to be more intentional with how you like engage with art. You know, it's kind of easy as a college student to like make a short film. There's a lot of infrastructure for it. There's like an organization at our school that like, you know, gave us funding and gave us advice and things like that, and helped us do this like screening that we did. And without that, I think it really comes down to how dedicated you are. So I hope that we can get our stuff together and figure it out at some point. But yeah, as Rob said, the world is a wild place nowadays. So who knows what the future holds.
Yeah, well, it should be fun, and especially if you're coming to the festival in August, there'll be plenty of people to network with and collab. So, all right. So, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today and for sharing the thoughtful process behind the lake. Before we wrap, please let our listeners know where can they follow your work, learn more about the lake, or stay in the loop on any upcoming projects you've got in the works.
Yeah, we have an Instagram for the lake, which is @thelake_film. And that's the main source of information on where we give updates on where the film is screening, when it's eventually up on YouTube. There'll be links to that. And that's the main place to follow our work. Yeah, I think that's our only social media link, actually. Unless I'm forgetting
Yeah, and
something.
if anyone, you know, wants to, feel free to like, if you want to like talk to us about the movie, feel free to like DM us on there or anything like that. Like,
Yeah.
we're both happy to discuss the movie or talk about it.
And we can give you
and
our
I
other
think,
contact info as well.
yeah, we can give you further contact info. So yeah, totally. But that's probably the best place. I agree.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks
you
so much.
Yeah.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Richmond Film Network podcast. Thanks to our guest and to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share. Tune in next week to see who's on the RFN pod. Until then, keep the cameras rolling.